Adjustment, kind of like what we've been preaching to our guys all week, right? Like we're going a day early, so it's our normal routine. Really didn't affect the way we practice Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tomorrow will be our Thursday practice like we always are, but when they get done with it, right, then we're going to have to pack up, put ourselves in a position because the plane is going to leave that afternoon, right? So instead of being home on a Thursday, you're going to be in Oregon, but we're going to kind of go through the same routine Thursday, Friday. Saturday, it's a 2:30 kickoff, even though it's 12:30 there, it's 2:30 kickoff here, which we've had the last 2 weeks, so there's a lot of continuity on how we do things timing-wise and all that goes into it. Health standpoint, really no changes. Update on Caden. Caden got home, I believe on whatever today is. I get screwed up. Today's Tuesday. Today's Wednesday. He got home Tuesday. Everything is very positive. Doctor's been awesome about it. Surgery went well, so he's on his road to recovery. And everybody that played last Saturday is ever going to play this Saturday, so should be good to go there. With that, I'll open up for questions.
There's just been a lot of conversations about teams going to the West Coast and,
Yeah.
and what that looks like. Have you looked in at all to see
So two things. When this first came up on our schedule, it had been my experience. The best thing I loved was actually, depending on the time of the game in the NFL, sometimes you would go the day before, but you would stay the day after because the side effects of the game the next week was twice as effective. But the NCAA does not allow you to stay after unless it's a bowl game, right? So we actually knew right away that it was going to have to be 2 days in advance. I wanted to do that versus one. I think there are a couple schools that began to read and hear and listen and change their thought process and change from a 2-day to a 1-day. I've said it all along, this is what I want to do, this is how we want to do it. It's what I really believe in. So we've kind of conditioned our guys to follow that path. So, for us, I think the added bonus that we didn't foresee coming was when I got selected into that 12:30 time slot, which is really not a very common time slot out there. Usually, it's the afternoon, it's the evening game. So, that's what we stayed with, and that's what we're rolling.
Is there anything in particular that you wanted to keep it at that 2 days? Like, was there anything in your studies that...
I did not have Lauren Tate on a phone call on my bingo card today. Go ahead.
Was there anything...
Usually shoot center square.
Good point, touche. I got you.
Anything in particular that was such a sticking point that you wanted to stick with that 2-day? Like anything in your studies that you knew that like you don't want to vary from that 2-day?
Well, the biggest thing is we wanted to stay on rhythm for where we are, and if we did what we normally do, we'd have to leave so early on Friday and get going to get to a normal time out there. So we'll get out there Thursday, really get there right about, it'll be about chow time. They'll have a little bit of food on the plane, but all of our guys, knowing them, should be very hungry. So feed them. There'll be an NFL game and a college game going on. They'll have a snack that night, and then we'll get them up at 8 o'clock, which is, well, they'll probably be up before that, but we'll do our normal Friday routine, kind of like almost the exact same time frame we'll do it here. I think in a 3-day window, it's hard to adjust your body clock. It's just what it is. So this kind of allows us to stay right on track. I've seen everything. Some people keep their time the same time from where they're coming from. Some people try to figure it out too much. I think our guys enjoy the process. I am a schedule guy. I think if you talk to our players, the one thing that is pretty regimented is I talk about daily schedule. Daily schedules always adjust, but the schedule is a schedule, and I think we condition our guys to think that way.
I guess on the schedule front, we talked to Pat yesterday, and he talked about how he's kind of shifted his to get here at 5
Pat
in the
Bryant?
morning,
Yeah.
and get in some work on his own. Just what have you maybe seen that do for him to have a regimen?
So ironically, this week, right, we're in week, basically our 8th game, but the Tuesday after Kansas, I saw Pat in the first 2 games really begin to play at a high level. I saw it in his preparation. I saw the rewards of what I saw, and so I didn't tell anybody. We went into the Tuesday meeting of Central Michigan. We have a 7 a.m. I always start the day, so I always have the first 5 minutes of a team meeting to show our schedule of the day and what we're going to do at practice. And I got done, and I said, Pat, would you mind standing up and telling the team what building your routine is and what that means? And I didn't give him any warning, and he literally got up and gave a 5-minute talk to the team about preparation and routine. Talked about how he gets in the building at 5:15, 5:30 every morning. He catches 50 balls before practice. He does it to watch film. He talks about his post-practice routine, and I've seen that manifest so many times. And at the end, I said, have you done it your whole career? He goes, no, I wish I had, right? And he said he'd given credit to, he learned it from Isaiah, right? Isaiah taught him how to catch X number of balls. And I think that's one great thing about our building, our place is, seniors graduate, but tradition never does, right? So the more tradition these guys can pass on to the younger players. Pat gave that talk, and the next day we had about 80 players that were out on the field 20 minutes earlier than they've ever been, just from that talk by Pat Bryant. So I made that reference again this week because this routine this week is going to be a little different. You just have to adjust. but the work that we do and the way that we do it stays the same. But it's been awesome for Pat.
With Saturday being such an emotional day, how have you seen your guys put that to bed and focus on practice?
This Saturday or last Saturday?
This past Saturday.
I don't think it was emotional. I mean, it was an emotional day, right? A lot goes into it, but I think our guys just enjoyed the moment.
My
I
question
know,
is-
yeah.
I guess my question is, have you sensed they're locked in?
Oh, hell yeah. Like, these guys have been, I think there hasn't been any Wednesday, Thursday, whenever I usually talk to you guys, where I've been concerned about our prep. Like, there's definitely days that are better practices or whatnot, but their intent, their work ethic, their deliverance, I think the voice of Luke Altmaier on practice days is really, really significantly higher on offense. Like, he demands it, he gets it. Josh Krutz up front on the defense side of the ball. Miles Scott, Dylan Rosiak, Gabe Ackas, Alec Bryant, Alec did to a certain degree, but even Xavier Scott, those guys, they just understand what the level needs to be at and the precedence. So, listen, Michigan was awesome. You know, we always did this little, hey, raise your right hand, pat your shoulder on the back, and move on, right? Like, hell of a job, but all we did is put ourselves in a position to make this game bigger.
Brett, when we got JMO yesterday, he said something interesting, which is everywhere else he's been, there's been a defensive playbook. Here we don't have that. It really makes his guys diligent when they take notes in the meetings, and that's essentially the playbook.
Yeah.
And what they do. Have you found that has worked throughout your career?
Well, you guys, I write, right? Like,
Right.
I'm a bad typer. Like, if you ever get an email from me that's more than 100 words, realize I just gave you 15 minutes of my life, right? Like, I can't type. But I do think you learn by writing, and so yeah, when I made the decision to come here, right? We don't hand out, and the reason the NFL really doesn't do that is because there's so much continuity. Guys are, and people, all of a sudden you see notebooks coming up on the internet for sale, right? So we made a conscientious effort when we came here that we weren't going to install playbooks, right? We were going to install by daily installs, and it forces our guys to learn it. It also allows you to adjust, as you know. But JMO, in my opinion, not just as a D-line coach, he's one of the best teachers I've ever been around. Like, I just things out of my mind when I became an assistant coach, I was a GA, and when Coach Fry offered me the job to be a linebacker coach, he said the greatest concern he has was my age, because I was young. I was the same age as the guys. Literally, the older guys in my room were guys that I might have hosted on recruiting visits, or were like literally 2 years younger than me. But he said, other than your age, the greatest concern I have is you've never taught in a classroom. You've never been back when I was hired, a lot of times guys were high school teachers, right, or high school coaches that became, college coaches. That transition now has evolved, but I really press my young guys. We get them on the board, we make them teach. When JMO was a young coach, I made him get on the board and teach. So JMO's a really good teacher. Shoot, there was one time in fall camp 2 years ago, we have seating charts,
Sure.
right? And in our defensive meeting room, in our every meeting we have, there's a seating chart. Sure. And JMO threw in my box the seating chart for the D-line room, and he had made corrections from the day before because one of the guys we recruited was a lefty and he didn't know it, right? Because that doesn't show up on D-line play, right? So he had adjusted his entire room to two left-handed players that needed room to right to their left. Okay. And I'm like, for a person to think of that and install that into their classroom environment, I think that's the teaching that goes on, especially in JMO's room in this building. That's really big.
Coach, you've experienced some tough buildings this year. Went to Lincoln, went to State College. This place, though, notoriously is one of those
Right.
top. How is it different? What do you understand this place as opposed to the other place?
You write an article on crowd noise? Is that what you're doing?
Well, no,
Yeah,
it's just how you doing it.
Yeah, no, I had a good fortune early in my career. I was a graduate assistant at Iowa. Went to the University of Oregon and played. And at that point, I saw this place was really at a different level, right? And then watched it, admired it over the years. Chip Kelly, we competed in the Rose Bowl. So that year, I had watched in our Rose Bowl preparation. I had watched a lot of TV copies of, and that's when things were really beginning to roll there, right? And then admired, and then Dan, during this 2.5 year window, he's lost one game at home, right? So the environment they have there, obviously we have the good fortune of the Penn State game, however you want to, some people say it's a bad fortune, it was because we lost, but it's only a true loss if you don't learn, right? And we had the learning experience of that day that we all have to own and carry it in our front pocket, not our back pocket. We got to learn that thing every day. And, I know it's not only going to be a loud crowd, it's going to be a very active crowd. They're on top of you. It's a bowl that really sits really on top of you. They got a duck on a bike, and they got all kinds of stuff that are going on. And there's an environment there that is truly just awesome. My relationship with Nike, I got a lot of those Nike people are Oregon people, right? And they have a lot of pride in that stadium. It's named after a lumberjack. How much good? I mean, it can't get any better than that, right? Like so. I think they remodeled at 90, if I'm not mistaken, and created an even louder environment. So, yeah, we're excited to play there, to go on the road and show the growth that we've had, hopefully, since Penn State. I know it's going to be probably the most energized and loud crowd that we've seen, probably literally maybe in my coaching career.
Brett, obviously,
more happens.
Will Stein and Barry have
Yeah.
a history together. What have you seen from Will, and how does Barry's
I don't know
relationship
Will.
with
I
him?
met him, but extremely creative, much like Barry, very, very driven on certain principles. You can see the things that he loves to do, and I think you even look at Oregon offensively, the growth they've had over the season from the first game to where it is. You can tell he's learning his quarterback and all the skills that he brings and how to play to his strengths. I think that's one of the greatest things about Barry is he really truly does maximize player strengths, minimize their weaknesses, and you can see the same thing with Will and their offense. They're very obviously we got to play them, so they're not exciting to watch, but you can see. I've really enjoyed the game plan and the game prep of finding these people. Got some dynamic players that they use very, very well.
We've never asked, but why is Punt Shield your baby? Why have you zoned in on that?
So when I first started coaching, we used to run traditional punt like the pros run, right? Like where you kick back and you have double wings, and you would practice punt every day because that technique was so hard to teach. You practiced it every day. So there was a large volume of work that were associated with learning to teach punt, right? And then I ran that my first year at Wisconsin, and everybody was running shield punt. So at that time, Dave Wannstedt was the head coach at Pittsburgh, and he had a young coach that was running his punt team. Charlie Partridge was with me. He said we should bring him in and have us teach shield punt, right? And teach shield punt. So I'm like, I get with the AD. I think it was Coach Alvarez. I said, hey, I'd like to bring this guy in, and they're going to charge us $5,000 if I bring him in during the out of season. I want him to teach me shield punt. So I'm like so excited. I've been trying to figure out shield punt for like years. And so I bring in, and it's actually the coach that was at Boston College, then went to the Packers.
Halfway.
Halfley was the guy, right? So I brought in Halfley and give him his check for $5,000, and then we sit down and we're starting to go through shield punt, and he said, okay, this is where we go, and I'm like, okay. We're 10 minutes into this thing, and I had reserved a day and a half, 2 days of my schedule, and he goes, that's it. I'm like, what? He goes, that's it. I'm like, no. Right, then we go and I drill him for about another hour, and coach, that's it, right? And so I'm like, okay, let's go to lunch, right? Like it was by far probably the best $5,000 he ever made, but that's when I realized that shield was like a really big part of it, how those guys were coached. So that was kind of my first year. I was a special teams coordinator, but I didn't want to have all that time commitment. I wasn't doing it, so I tried to coach a phase in every phase of the kicking game, and that's why I've held on to shield. And then, Barry Lundy was my punt coordinator when I was at Arkansas, and I ran the shield, and I got to see how he worked and preached and teached and coordinated. So it's just kind of that, and plus it's all O linemen, tight ends, and D linemen. That's what I love. So that's probably the biggest part.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,